The morning sun filtered through the tall windows of Judge Patricia Williams' chambers, casting long shadows across the polished mahogany desk where countless life-altering decisions had been made. But today, the most heart-wrenching case of her 15-year career sat motionless in an oversized leather chair, looking impossibly small and fragile against the imposing backdrop of legal volumes and framed certificates. 3-year-old Emma Martinez hadn't moved for nearly an hour. Her tiny frame was curled into the chair like a broken bird, dark eyes fixed on some invisible point in the distance that only she could see. The worn teddy bear clutched against her chest had become her armor against a world that had suddenly turned savage and incomprehensible. Her silence was so complete, so absolute, that it seemed to swallow the very air in the room. "She hasn't spoken a word since that night," whispered Maria Santos, Emma's emergency foster mother, her voice thick with emotion. Maria had raised 4 children of her own and fostered dozens more, but Emma's complete withdrawal into herself was unlike anything she'd ever witnessed. She won't eat without coaxing, won't play with toys, won't even cry. It's like she's disappeared somewhere deep inside where none of us can reach her. Judge Williams studied the child with professional concern, masking her personal anguish. In her years on the Denver family court bench, she'd seen the aftermath of unspeakable crimes against children, but Emma's case haunted her sleepless nights. The little girl had been discovered by Detective Sarah Chun 3 weeks ago, hidden in the bathroom closet of her suburban home, while her mother's blood was still spreading across the kitchen linoleum. The crime scene photos were seared into Williams' memory. Isabella Martinez, 28 years old, brutally murdered while her husband worked the night shift at the hospital. Dr. Michael Thompson shifted uncomfortably in his chair, adjusting his wire-rimmed glasses for the 3rd time in 10 minutes. The court's chief child psychologist had built his reputation on reaching troubled children, but Emma Martinez was testing every skill he'd acquired in 25 years of practice. Traditional play therapy had failed spectacularly. Emma would simply stare through the colorful toys as if they were invisible. Art therapy sessions ended with blank pages and unused crayons. Even the gentlest attempts at conversation were met with that same haunting, empty stare that seemed to look right through him into some terrible memory she couldn't escape. "I've tried everything," Dr. Thompson admitted quietly, his usual confidence shaken. "Sand play therapy, music therapy, even bringing in therapy puppets. She doesn't respond to any external stimuli. It's the most severe case of selective mutism I've encountered in a child this young. The trauma has created what appears to be an almost catatonic state." Detective Sarah Chun paced the chamber like a caged predator, her frustration palpable. A 20-year veteran of Denver PD's Special Victims Unit, Chun had seen enough horrors to last several lifetimes, but cases involving children always hit differently. The investigation into Isabella Martinez's murder was stalling, and time was running out. Physical evidence was circumstantial, at best a few partial fingerprints that weren't in the system, some disturbed items in the house, and signs of a struggle. But Emma was their only witness, their only hope of understanding exactly what had happened in those terrifying minutes when her world exploded into violence and chaos. "The DA's office is breathing down my neck," Chun said, running her hands through her graying hair. "They need something concrete to move forward with charges against the father. But without Emma's testimony, we've got nothing solid. And honestly, double quotes," she paused, glancing at the silent child. "I'm starting to wonder if we're even looking at the right suspect." Judge Williams had been harboring the same doubts. Emma's father, Carlos Martinez, was devastated by his wife's murder and seemed genuinely concerned about his daughter's condition. His alibi was solid security cameras and badge swipes confirmed he'd been at Denver General Hospital all night. But domestic violence statistics were undeniable, and in most cases, involving murdered women, the perpetrator was someone close to the victim. There has to be something else we can try, Williams said, her voice carrying the weight of desperation she rarely allowed herself to show. She'd built her career on innovative approaches to family law, finding creative solutions when traditional methods failed. But Emma was challenging everything she thought she knew about helping traumatized children. The little girl's silence wasn't just heartbreaking, it was dangerous. If they couldn't unlock what Emma had witnessed that night, a potentially violent criminal might walk free to hurt others. The heavy knock on the chamber door interrupted her thoughts. Officer Jake Morrison stood in the doorway, his imposing 6-foot frame balanced by kind eyes that had seen too much but somehow maintained their compassion. Beside him, as if materializing from a dream, stood the most beautiful German Shepherd Williams had ever seen. Rex was 5 years old, with a thick coat of black and tan fur, intelligent amber eyes, and an aura of calm dignity that seemed to emanate peace into the tension-filled room. Morrison was part of Denver PD's Experimental Trauma Response Unit, a controversial new program that paired specially trained officers with therapy animals to help victims of violent crimes. Rex had been specifically trained to work with traumatized children, learning to recognize signs of distress and respond with the kind of unconditional acceptance that sometimes succeeded where human intervention failed. Your Honor, I know this is highly unusual, and I understand the legal complexities. Morrison began carefully, his weathered hands resting gently on Rex's head. But Rex has helped children who've been through similar trauma. Sometimes when human contact feels threatening or overwhelming, animals can provide a bridge back to trust and communication. Williams looked again at Emma, still frozen in that leather chair, still staring at nothing, still locked in a prison of silence and terror. Traditional therapeutic methods had utterly failed. The legal clock was ticking relentlessly, and more. Importantly, Emma's young mind was in danger of retreating so far into itself that she might never fully return. Sometimes, Williams realized, justice required taking unprecedented risks. Sometimes, healing demanded stepping outside the comfortable boundaries of conventional wisdom. As she studied the gentle dog and the broken child, she made a decision that would either save Emma Martinez or destroy her own judicial career. The chamber fell silent, except for the soft rhythm of Rex's breathing as everyone held their breath, wondering if this beautiful, shattered little girl would ever find her way back to the world of the living. Judge Patricia Williams stared at Officer Morrison and his canine partner, her mind racing through the legal minefield she was about to enter. In her 15 years on the bench, she had pushed boundaries before, but bringing a police dog into a family court proceeding involving a potential murder witness was uncharted territory. The implications were staggering, yet the alternative, watching Emma Martinez disappear further into her traumatic silence, was unacceptable. "Give me 5 minutes," Williams said to Morrison, then reached for her phone with trembling fingers. The call to District Attorney Robert Hayes went exactly as badly as she'd expected. A police dog? In family court? "Patricia, have you lost your mind?" Hayes' voice crackled through the speaker with barely contained fury. "We're dealing with a murder case here, not some feel-good therapy session. The defense will have a field day if they find out we introduced an unorthodox element like this into the proceedings." Williams held the phone away from her ear as Hayes continued his tirade. She glanced at Emma, still motionless in the oversized chair, and felt her resolve strengthen. "Bob, this child hasn't spoken in 3 weeks. Traditional methods aren't working. If we don't find a way to reach her soon, we'll have no case at all. And if this backfires, we'll face accusations of coercing testimony from a traumatized minor." "Using emotional manipulation," Hayes shot back. "Imagine the headlines. DA's office uses police dog to extract testimony from 3-year-old. My office would be crucified, and rightfully so." Dr. Thompson was furiously scribbling notes on his legal pad, his professional concerns mounting by the minute. "Judge Williams, I need to voice my reservations," he interjected quietly. "The liability issues alone could be enormous. What if the child has an adverse reaction to the dog? What if it traumatizes her further? We could be looking at malpractice, claims, ethical violations, even criminal charges for child endangerment." Detective Chun had been listening to the conversation with growing frustration. She'd spent sleepless nights reviewing crime scene photos, following dead-end leads, and watching their case grow colder by the day. "With all due respect to everyone's concerns about liability," she said, her voice tight with controlled emotion, "we're running out of time and options. Emma's father is still our prime suspect, but I'm starting to have serious doubts. If there's another perpetrator out there, every day that passes is another day he's free to potentially hurt someone else." Officer Morrison remained silent during the heated discussion, but his weathered face showed the patience of someone who had seen this debate many times before. Rex lay calmly at his feet, seemingly unbothered by the tension crackling through the room. The German shepherd's gentle eyes occasionally drifted toward Emma, as if he could sense her pain from across the chamber. "Officer Morrison," Williams said, ending her call with the still protesting Day, "tell me honestly, what are the success rates with cases like Emma's?" Morrison straightened slightly, choosing his words carefully. "Your Honor, I won't sugarcoat. Every case is different, and there are no guarantees. But in the past 18 months, Rex has helped establish communication with 12 children who had been completely non-responsive to traditional therapy. 8 of those children eventually provided testimony that was crucial to their cases. And the other 4? Dr. Thompson asked, his pen poised over his notepad. 2 showed significant improvement in their overall mental health, but never discussed the traumatic events. 1 child needed to be removed from the session due to an unexpected fear response to dogs. And 1... double quotes. Morrison paused, the memory clearly painful. 1 little boy actually regressed further after our session. His case is still ongoing. The room fell silent as everyone absorbed this information. Williams felt the weight of Emma's future pressing down on her shoulders. The wrong decision could shatter an already fragile mind, but inaction might condemn both Emma and other potential victims to continued suffering. Maria Santos, who had been quietly observing from the corner, finally spoke up. "Judge Williams, I've been caring for Emma for 3 weeks now. I've watched her waste away, getting thinner and more withdrawn every day. She barely eats, doesn't sleep through the night, and sometimes she just stares at nothing for hours. Whatever we're doing now isn't working." Her voice cracked with emotion. "I'd rather see her try to connect with that beautiful dog than watch her disappear completely." Williams looked again at Emma, noting the dark circles under her eyes, the way her small shoulders curved inward, as if trying to make herself invisible. The child was fading away before their eyes, and traditional therapeutic approaches had failed spectacularly. Sometimes, Williams realized, justice required extraordinary risks. "Dr. Thompson, I need your professional opinion. What's the worst-case scenario if we proceed?" The psychologist removed his glasses and cleaned them slowly, buying time to formulate his response. The worst case would be severe re-traumatization, possibly causing permanent psychological damage. Emma could retreat even further into herself, potentially developing more severe psychiatric complications. We could also face accusations of unprofessional conduct and experimenting on a vulnerable child. And if we don't try this approach, based on current progress, Emma may never recover her ability to communicate about the trauma. She could develop chronic PTSD, selective mutism that extends beyond this specific incident, and severe attachment disorders. Without processing what she experienced, she may never heal properly. Williams closed her eyes and took a deep breath. When she opened them, her decision was clear in her expression. "Officer Morrison, under my authority as presiding judge in this matter, I'm authorizing a supervised therapeutic session between Emma Martinez and your partner Rex. Dr. Thompson will monitor the session for any signs of distress and will proceed with extreme caution." The room erupted in a mixture of relief and anxiety. Hayes would be furious. The media would have a field day if word leaked out, and Williams' own career hung in the balance. But as she looked at Emma Martinez broken, silent, and disappearing, a little more each day, she knew she had made the only choice her conscience would allow. Rex raised his head slightly, as if sensing that his moment to help had finally arrived. The silence in Judge Williams' chambers was so profound that the soft click of Rex's nails against the polished hardwood floor sounded like gunshots. Officer Morrison guided his partner through the doorway with the reverence of someone entering. A sacred space, both man and dog moving with deliberate, careful precision. Rex's training was evident in every measured step his head, held high but non-threatening. His pace unhurried, his entire demeanor radiating the calm confidence that had made him legendary among Denver's trauma response teams. Emma Martinez, who had been staring blankly at the same spot on the wall for over an hour, suddenly shifted. It was subtle at first, just a slight turn of her head, as if responding to some sound only she could hear. But then her dark eyes, which had seemed dead to the world for 3 weeks, flickered with the faintest spark of awareness as they tracked Rex's movement across the room. Dr. Thompson's breath caught in his throat. In 25 years of working with traumatized children, he had learned to recognize the signs of breakthrough moments, and something was happening in Emma's frozen world. His pen hovered over his notepad, ready to document every nuance of this unprecedented interaction. "Easy, Rex," Morrison whispered, his voice barely audible. The German shepherd responded to the subtle command by slowing his pace even further, his intelligent amber eyes taking in the room's occupants with professional assessment. Rex had been in similar situations before, rooms filled with tension and desperate hope, where one wrong move could shatter a fragile child's last chance at healing. Detective Chun found herself holding her breath as she watched Emma's first sign of engagement with the world around her in weeks. The child's death grip on her worn teddy bear had loosened slightly, and her rigid posture was showing microscopic signs of relaxation. It wasn't much, but for a girl who had been essentially catatonic, any response was miraculous. Judge Williams motioned silently for everyone to remain perfectly still. Her judicial experience had taught her to read the subtle dynamics in her courtroom, but this was unlike anything she'd ever witnessed. The air itself seemed charged with possibility, as if the universe was holding its breath to see what would happen next. Rex surveyed the room with the wisdom of an old soul. His specialized training had taught him to read human emotions through scent, body language, and energy signatures that most people couldn't perceive. He could smell Emma's fear sharp and acrid, tinged with the metallic scent of trauma that seemed to seep from her very pores. But underneath that terror, he detected something else. Curiosity, faint but unmistakable. With movements so fluid they seemed choreographed, Rex padded toward the center of the room and settled into a perfect downstay position, approximately 15 feet from Emma's chair. His choice of distance was precise, close enough to be clearly visible and accessible, far enough away to avoid triggering any claustrophobic panic responses. He oriented his body at a slight angle, presenting a non-threatening profile while keeping Emma in his peripheral vision. The German shepherd's breathing was deep and rhythmic, his chest rising and falling in a hypnotic pattern that seemed to create its own calming atmosphere in the chamber. His ears were alert but relaxed, swiveling occasionally to track sounds in the room while never losing awareness of the small girl who had captured his professional attention. Emma's transformation was subtle but unmistakable. Her shoulders, which had been hunched defensively around her ears for weeks, began to settle slightly. The white-knuckled grip on her teddy bear loosened another degree, and most remarkably, her breathing pattern started to synchronize with Rex's steady rhythm. It was as if the dog's calm presence was teaching her nervous system how to regulate itself again. Maria Santos pressed her hand to her mouth to stifle a sob of relief. In 3 weeks of caring for Emma, she had never seen the child show interest in anything. Toys were ignored, food was barely touched, and attempts at conversation were met with that haunting, empty stare. But now, for the first time since that horrible night, Emma seemed present in her own body. Rex's training included an almost supernatural ability to remain motionless for extended periods. Police dogs learn patience as a survival skill, but therapy dogs, like Rex, took this to an entirely different level. He could hold his position for hours if necessary, providing a steady, calming presence without any expectation or demand for interaction. His very stillness became a gift to the traumatized child, a demonstration that not all beings in her world posed a threat. Minutes ticked by in absolute silence, but the quality of that silence was changing. What had been the dead quiet of trauma was slowly transforming into something different, the hushed anticipation of possibility. Emma's eyes, which had been vacant for so long, were showing signs of actual focus as she studied the beautiful animal before her. Dr. Thompson made careful notes about the subtle changes in Emma's demeanor. Her body temperature seemed to be normalizing the cold, clammy pallor that had worried him was giving way to healthier coloration. Her breathing was deeper and more regular than he'd observed since her rescue. Most significantly, her eyes were tracking Rex's movements with genuine attention, rather than the dissociative staring that had characterized her previous behavior. Detective Chun found herself mentally cataloging every detail of this extraordinary interaction. If Rex could somehow help Emma find her voice, it might unlock not only the child's healing, but also the key to solving Isabella Martinez's murder. The stakes couldn't be higher, but for now, she forced herself to focus on the miracle unfolding before them, a broken little girl, tentatively reconnecting with the world through the patient presence of a remarkable dog. Officer Morrison watched his partner work with professional pride, tempered by cautious optimism. He had seen Rex perform similar magic with other traumatized children, but each case was unique. Some children responded immediately, others took weeks to build trust. A few, heartbreakingly, never connected at all. But something about Emma's response felt different, more promising than many cases he'd worked. As the afternoon light shifted through the tall windows, casting new shadows across the chamber, everyone in the room sensed they were witnessing something extraordinary. Rex remained perfectly still, a living meditation on patience and compassion, while Emma slowly began her journey back to the world of the living. The grandfather clock in the corner of Judge Williams' chambers ticked away 23 minutes of breathless silence before Emma Martinez made the move that would change everything. The adults in the room had become living statues, afraid that even the slightest sound might shatter whatever fragile connection was building between the traumatized child and the patient. German Shepherd lying motionless on the polished floor. Rex hadn't moved a muscle since settling into his perfect downstay, but his amber eyes remained gently focused on Emma with the kind of unconditional acceptance that only animals seem capable of offering. His breathing continued in that slow, hypnotic rhythm that had somehow synchronized with Emma's own respiratory pattern, creating an island of calm in the tension-filled chamber. Then, without warning, Emma's small hands released their death grip on the worn teddy bear that had been her only comfort for 3 weeks. The stuffed animal tumbled from her lap to the floor with a soft thud that seemed to echo through the room like thunder. Dr. Thompson's pen froze above his notepad as he watched Emma slowly uncurl her legs from beneath her, her bare feet finding purchase on the cold hardwood floor. Maria Santos felt tears streaming down her cheeks as she witnessed something she had begun to believe might never happen. Emma was moving with purpose, with intention, with something that looked almost like hope flickering in her dark eyes. The little girl's descent from the oversized leather chair was painfully slow, each movement deliberate and careful, as if she were testing whether her body still belonged to her. Her legs, weakened by weeks of sitting motionless, trembled slightly. As she stood, for a moment she swayed uncertainly, and Detective Chun had to grip the arms of her chair to keep from rushing forward to steady the child. But Emma found her balance, and then she took her first tentative step toward Rex. The sound of her bare foot against the floor was barely audible, but it might as well have been a symphony to the adults, watching this miraculous moment unfold. Officer Morrison's weathered hands clenched involuntarily at his sides, every instinct telling him to encourage the child, but his training and experience warned him to remain absolutely silent. Rex, with the wisdom of countless hours working with traumatized children, didn't so much as twitch an ear. His amber eyes tracked Emma's approach with gentle interest, but he made no movement that might be interpreted as threatening or demanding. He had learned that healing happened on the victim's timeline, not his own, and patience was the greatest gift he could offer. Emma took another step, then another. Her movement was hesitant, like a wild animal approaching something that might be either salvation or trap. Judge Williams found herself holding her breath so tightly her chest ached, but she couldn't risk exhaling for fear of disrupting whatever magic was happening in her chambers. The distance between Emma and Rex seemed to stretch infinitely. 15 feet had never looked so vast. Each of Emma's steps was a victory against the terror that had held her captive for weeks. A small rebellion against the voice in her head that screamed at her to run, to hide, to disappear back into the safety of silence and stillness. Dr. Thompson watched through the lens of his professional training, cataloging the subtle changes in Emma's body language and facial expressions. The rigid tension that had defined her posture was melting away degree by degree. Her shoulders were settling, her jaw unclenching, and most remarkably, her eyes were showing signs of genuine curiosity rather than the vacant stare that had haunted him for weeks. When Emma was still 3 feet away from Rex, she stopped. For a terrifying moment, everyone in the room wondered if she had reached her limit, if the fear would win and send her scurrying back to the false safety of her chair. Rex remained perfectly still, offering no pressure, no expectation, just his quiet presence and the steady rhythm of his breathing. Then Emma did something that made Maria Santos gasp audibly. She smiled. It was barely perceptible, just the faintest upturn of her lips, but it was the first smile anyone had seen from her since that horrible night, when her world exploded into violence and chaos. Emboldened by some internal courage that surprised everyone, including herself, Emma closed the remaining distance between herself and the German shepherd. She knelt down beside Rex, with the careful movements of someone approaching something precious and fragile, her small hands hovering uncertainly above his thick, beautiful coat. Rex's training had prepared him for this moment. He remained motionless as Emma's tiny fingers made contact with his fur, but every muscle in his body radiated gentle acceptance. His coat was incredibly soft, warmed by his body heat, and as Emma's fingers sank into the thick fur, she seemed to draw strength from the contact. The touch lasted only seconds before Emma pulled her hand back, but the connection had been made. She looked directly at Rex for the first time, studying his gentle eyes and noble face with the kind of intense focus that children reserve for things that truly matter to them. And then, in a voice so soft, it was barely more than a whisper, Emma spoke the words that would echo through the Denver legal system for years to come. Her voice was rusty from weeks of disuse, fragile as spun glass, but unmistakably clear. Good dog. The 2 words hung in the air like a prayer answered, like a miracle witnessed. Like the first crack of dawn after the longest night, Judge Williams felt her heart stop and restart. Detective Chun's eyes filled with tears she hadn't allowed herself to shed in 20 years. And Dr. Thompson's careful professional composure crumbled as he realized he was witnessing the kind of breakthrough that defined entire careers. Officer Morrison's throat tightened with emotion as he watched his partner work his particular brand of magic once again. Rex's tail gave the slightest wag, not enough to startle Emma, but enough to acknowledge that her words had been heard and accepted. In that moment, everyone in the chamber understood that they had just witnessed something extraordinary. Emma Martinez had found her voice, and with it, perhaps the key to healing, justice, and hope. The two words, "good dog," had shattered the silence like a stone through glass. But what followed was even more miraculous than that first breakthrough. Emma Martinez, who had spoken her first words in 3 weeks, didn't retreat back into her protective shell. Instead, she remained kneeling beside Rex, her small hand still resting on his warm fur, as if drawing strength from the connection. Judge Williams barely dared to breathe as she watched the most extraordinary transformation unfold in her chambers. Emma's rigid posture, the defensive hunching of shoulders that had defined her since the rescue, was melting away like ice in spring sunshine. The little girl's breathing, which had been shallow and rapid for weeks, was deepening to match Rex's steady rhythm. Most remarkably, the deathly pallor that had worried everyone was being replaced by the faintest hint of healthy color in her cheeks. Dr. Thompson set down his pen entirely, knowing that this moment transcended anything he could capture in clinical notes. In his 25 years of practice, he had read about breakthroughs like this in professional journals, but witnessing it firsthand was like watching someone literally come back from the dead. Emma's eyes, which had been vacant and unfocused for so long, were now alert and engaged as she studied Rex's gentle face with the intense curiosity of a child discovering something wonderful. Officer Morrison watched his partner work with a mixture of professional pride and deep emotional satisfaction. Rex's specialized training was evident in every micro-movement, or rather, in his perfect stillness. The German shepherd remained motionless except for the gentle rise and fall of his chest, allowing Emma to control every aspect of their interaction. His amber eyes stayed soft and welcoming, never demanding attention, but always available when Emma looked his way. "Can she hear us?" Detective Chun whispered so quietly that her words were barely audible even in the profound silence of the chamber. Dr. Thompson nodded almost imperceptibly. "She's aware of everything around her now, but we need to be extremely careful not to pressure her or make her feel like she's being observed or judged. Any sense of adult expectation could send her right back into withdrawal." As if to prove his point, Emma suddenly shifted from kneeling to sitting cross-legged beside Rex, a movement that brought her even closer to the patient dog. The change in position seemed to surprise even her, as if her body was making decisions that her conscious mind hadn't fully approved. But instead of the panic that might have accompanied such an unexpected action weeks ago, Emma seemed curious about her own boldness. Maria Santos pressed her hand to her heart, feeling it flutter with hope she had been afraid to allow herself. For 3 weeks, she had watched Emma waste away, becoming thinner and more withdrawn each day. The child had eaten only when coaxed, slept fitfully when exhaustion finally overcame terror, and moved through the foster home like a ghost haunting her own life. But now, sitting beside Rex with increasing confidence, Emma looked more alive than she had since that horrible night. Rex's training included an almost supernatural awareness of emotional energy, and he could sense Emma's growing comfort. Very slowly, almost imperceptibly, he adjusted his position, slightly, not enough to startle her, but enough to create a more welcoming angle for her continued proximity. The movement was so subtle that only Officer Morrison, who knew his partners, Every gesture even noticed it. Emma noticed it too. Her dark eyes tracked Rex's tiny adjustment, and something that might have been a smile ghosted across her features. She reached out again, this time with more confidence, and ran her small fingers through the thick fur along Rex's neck. The German Shepherd's coat was incredibly soft, and Emma seemed mesmerized by the texture, her fingers working through the fur with the kind of focused attention that suggested she was anchoring herself in this new reality. "Beautiful," she whispered, the words so soft that Judge Williams almost convinced herself she had imagined it. But Dr. Thompson's sharp intake of breath confirmed that Emma had indeed spoken again, her vocabulary expanding from 2 words to 3. In the span of minutes, the afternoon light streaming through the tall windows seemed to grow warmer as Emma grew braver. She shifted again, this time lying on her side next to Rex, her head pillowed on her arm as she studied the dog's profile. With fascination, Rex remained perfectly still, but his tail gave the slightest wag, just enough to acknowledge Emma's growing trust without overwhelming her with too much enthusiasm. "His eyes are kind," Emma observed in that same whisper-soft voice, speaking more to herself than to anyone in the room. But her words carried clearly in the hushed chamber, and every adult felt their hearts clench with emotion at this evidence of Emma's returning ability to process and express her observations about the world around her. Detective Chun found herself blinking back tears as she watched this miraculous interaction unfold. For weeks, she had been haunted by the image of Emma frozen in terror in that closet, covered in her mother's blood, too traumatized to even cry. But this child lying peacefully beside a gentle dog bore little resemblance to that broken little girl. The transformation was so complete, it seemed impossible, yet Chin was witnessing it with her own eyes. Officer Morrison made subtle hand signals to Rex, gestures so small they were invisible to anyone not trained to look for them. The communications reinforced what Rex already knew. Remain calm, stay available, let Emma control the pace of interaction. The German Shepherd's response was a barely perceptible settling of his body, a demonstration of even deeper relaxation that invited Emma to match his energy. Emma accepted the invitation, her own small body relaxing further as she continued to stroke Rex's fur. "Soft," she murmured, adding another word to her growing vocabulary. "Warm." Judge Williams felt tears threatening as she watched this extraordinary healing process unfold in real time. She had made a career of protecting children, but she had never seen anything like this transformation. Emma was literally coming back to life before their eyes, her personality emerging from the protective cocoon of trauma that had encased her for weeks. As the minutes ticked by, Emma grew even braver, eventually resting her head against Rex's shoulder in a gesture of complete trust that left every adult in the room struggling to contain their emotions. The broken silence, the tentative touches, the whispered words, all were signs that Emma Martinez was finding her way back to the world of the living, one gentle moment at a time. As the afternoon sun cast golden rays through Judge Williams' chambers, Emma Martinez had transformed from a silent, traumatized shell into a child tentatively reconnecting with the world. Her small body was curled against Rex's warm side, her fingers continuously stroking his thick fur, as if the tactile connection was essential to her sense of safety. What happened next would shatter everything they thought they knew about Isabella Martinez's murder. Emma's whispered conversations with Rex had started innocently, enough simple observations about his soft fur and kind eyes. But as her comfort level grew, her words began to take on a different quality, carrying the weight of secrets that had been locked away in her traumatized mind for 3 weeks. "Rex," Emma whispered, her voice still fragile, but growing stronger with each passing minute. "You're a good dog. Not like the scary man." Detective Chun's blood ran cold, her 20 years of experience instantly recognizing the significance. of Emma's words. She exchanged a sharp glance with Judge Williams, both women understanding that they might be on the verge of a breakthrough that would change everything about their investigation. Dr. Thompson leaned forward slightly, his professional instincts engaged but tempered by the knowledge that pushing too hard could send Emma back into her protective silence. "Let her talk to Rex," he mouthed silently to the others. "Don't interrupt." Emma continued her whispered conversation with the German shepherd, treating him like the most trusted confidant in the world. "Mommy was crying, Rex. She was so scared." The scary man had red hands. All red. Officer Morrison felt his partner's body tense slightly beneath Emma's touch. Rex's specialized training included the ability to sense when conversations were moving into traumatic territory, and his subtle shift in alertness indicated he was prepared to provide additional emotional support if needed. "Daddy wasn't home," Emma continued, her small voice taking on the matter-of-fact tone that children often used when recounting events they didn't fully understand. "Daddy was at the hospital making people feel better, but the scary man came anyway." Judge Williams felt her heart hammering against her ribs as she realized the implications of Emma's words. For weeks, they had been investigating Carlos Martinez as the primary suspect in his wife's murder. His alibi had been solid, but domestic violence statistics made spouses the most likely perpetrators. Now Emma's testimony was suggesting an entirely different scenario. Detective Chun's mind was racing, immediately beginning to reassemble the pieces of their investigation through this new lens. If Carlos Martinez wasn't the perpetrator, then who was this scary man Emma kept referencing? And why had their initial investigation missed this crucial possibility? Emma's next words sent shockwaves through the chamber. "The scary man said mean things to Mommy. He said she couldn't hide from him anymore." Dr. Thompson's professional composure cracked slightly as he realized they were potentially dealing with a stalking case that had escalated to murder. The psychological profile of their perpetrator would be completely different from what they had been assuming. This wasn't a domestic violence case. This was something far more sinister. "What did the scary man look like, sweetheart?" Maria Santos whispered, unable to contain herself despite Dr. Thompson's earlier warnings about not interrupting. Emma looked up from Rex's fur, her dark eyes meeting Maria's for the first time in weeks. He was big, bigger than Daddy, and he had angry eyes. Not like Rex's eyes. Rex has happy eyes. She turned back to the German shepherd, seeking comfort in his steady presence before continuing her devastating testimony. "The scary man hurt Mommy. She screamed and screamed, but I hid like she told me to. I hid in the little dark place and covered my ears." Rex shifted slightly, somehow sensing Emma's growing distress. His movement was minimal, but perfectly calculated to provide additional comfort without being intrusive. The German shepherd's amber eyes remained gentle and accepting, giving Emma a safe focal point as she navigated the treacherous waters of her memories. "Mommy said my name," Emma whispered, tears beginning to flow down her cheeks for the first time since her rescue. She said, "Emma, stay hidden. Don't come out no matter what." So I stayed hidden. I stayed hidden until the nice lady policeman found me. Detective Chun felt her throat constrict with emotion as she realized Emma had been following her mother's final instructions, staying hidden in that closet while Isabella Martinez died, trying to protect her daughter even in her final moments. "The scary man looked for me," Emma continued, her voice growing smaller with each revelation. "I heard him walking around, opening doors. But Mommy hid me good. He didn't find me." Judge Williams closed her eyes briefly, overwhelmed by the horror of what Emma had endured. The little girl had not only witnessed her mother's murder, but had spent terrifying minutes listening to the killer search for her, knowing that discovery might mean her own death. "Did you know the scary man?" Dr. Thompson asked gently, his professional training overriding his emotional response. Had you seen him before? Emma nodded slowly. He came to our house before. Mommy didn't like it. She told him to go away. But he kept coming back. He said Mommy belonged to him. The pieces of the puzzle were falling into place with sickening clarity. Detective Chun was already mentally reviewing Isabella Martinez's case file, looking for any mention of an ex-boyfriend, a stalker, or any other male figure who might fit Emma's description. The entire investigation would need to be redirected. Precious time had been lost, but now they finally had a direction to pursue. Officer Morrison watched his partner provide steady emotional support as Emma unburdened herself of the terrible secrets she had been carrying. Rex's presence had created a safe space where truth could finally emerge, no matter how painful or horrifying that truth might be. Emma looked up at the adults surrounding her, her eyes clear and focused for the first time in weeks. The scary man's name was Miguel, she said with devastating simplicity. Mommy said he used to love her, but his love turned mean. In that moment, everyone in the chamber understood that Emma Martinez had just provided them with the key to solving her mother's murder and identified a killer who was still walking free. The name Miguel hung in the air like a thunderclap, transforming Judge Williams' chambers from a place of healing into the epicenter of a criminal investigation that had just taken a dramatic turn. Detective Chun was already reaching for her. Phone before Emma had finished speaking, her 20 years of experience telling her that every second counted when a killer remained free on the streets of Denver. I need an emergency meeting with Chief Rodriguez and D. Hayes, Chun said into her phone, her voice tight with controlled urgency. We've got a major development in the Martinez murder case. The primary suspect has changed, and we may have an active threat still at large. Judge Williams felt the weight of responsibility settling heavily on her shoulders. Emma's breakthrough testimony, delivered through her connection with Rex, had not only provided crucial evidence, but had also revealed that they had potentially wasted 3 weeks pursuing the wrong suspect while the real killer remained free to potentially harm others. Emma continued to stroke Rex's fur, seemingly unaware of the controlled chaos her words had unleashed around her. The German shepherd remained perfectly still, his amber eyes tracking the sudden flurry of adult activity while maintaining his primary focus on the small girl, who needed his steady presence now more than ever. Emma, sweetheart, Dr. Thompson said gently, kneeling down to her level. You've been incredibly brave telling us about the scary man. Can you remember anything else about Miguel? Did your mommy ever talk about where he lived or worked? The little girl looked up from Rex's comforting presence, her dark eyes showing a clarity that had been absent for weeks. Mommy said he worked where they fix cars. She was scared because he knew where we lived, where I went to school, where she bought groceries. He followed us sometimes. Detective Chun felt her blood pressure spike as she realized they were dealing with a classic stalking case that had escalated to murder. Miguel wasn't just an ex-boyfriend, he was a predator who had systematically terrorized Isabella Martinez before ultimately killing her. The fact that he had been tracking the family's movements made him even more dangerous. Did Miguel have a last name that you remember? Judge Williams asked, her judicial training helping her maintain a calm demeanor despite the urgency of the situation. Emma nodded slowly. Santos. Mommy called him Miguel Santos. She said he used to be nice, but then he got mean and wouldn't leave us alone. The name hit Maria Santos like a physical blow. Santos is my last name too, she whispered, her face pale with horror. Oh my God, what if he's family? What if he knows I'm fostering Emma? The implications were staggering. If Miguel Santos was related to Maria Santos, Emma's foster mother, then the child might not be safe even in protective custody. Detective Chun immediately began coordinating with dispatch to have patrol units stationed outside Maria's home while they investigated the potential family connection. Officer Morrison watched the controlled chaos unfold around them while keeping one eye on Emma and Rex. The child seemed remarkably calm despite the adult panic surrounding her, as if finally sharing her terrible secret had lifted a crushing weight from her small shoulders. Rex sensed the change in the room's energy and adjusted accordingly, his training allowing him to provide stability in the midst of crisis. Within 30 minutes, Judge Williams' chambers had been transformed into an impromptu command center. Chief of Police Maria Rodriguez had arrived with a team of detectives, while D.I. Robert Hayes paced the room with his phone pressed to his ear, coordinating with the prosecutor's office to redirect their entire case strategy. "We've got a problem," Detective Lisa Parker announced as she burst through the chamber doors with a file folder clutched in her hands. Miguel Santos was released from county lockup 2 days ago. He'd been serving a 6-month sentence for violating a restraining order against Isabella Martinez. His release date was moved up for good behavior. The room fell silent except for the sound of Emma's gentle murmuring to Rex. The adults exchanged horrified glances as they realized the full scope of their failure. Miguel Santos had been in their custody right under their noses while they pursued Carlos Martinez as their primary suspect. Not only had they wasted precious investigative time, but they had also released a dangerous predator back onto the streets without proper monitoring. "Get me everything on Miguel Santos," Chief Rodriguez barked to her team. "Employment records, known associates, family connections, vehicle information, everything. I want BOLO alerts out to every department in the tri-state area within hour." Dr. Thompson had been quietly observing Emma throughout the dramatic revelations, and what he saw both amazed and concerned him. The child who had been catatonic just hours earlier was now displaying remarkable resilience, but he worried about the psychological impact of being thrust into the center of such intense law enforcement activity. "Judge Williams," he said quietly, "I think we need to consider Emma's well-being in all of this. She's made tremendous progress today, but this level of chaos and urgency could be re-traumatizing." Emma looked up at the mention of her name, her small hand still resting on Rex's warm fur. "Is the scary man going to hurt other mommies?" she asked with the devastating directness that only children possess. The question silenced the room full of seasoned law enforcement professionals. Here was a 3-year-old child who had survived unimaginable trauma, yet her primary concern was for other potential victims. Detective Chun felt tears threatening as she knelt down beside Emma and Rex. "We're going to catch the scary man, Emma," Chun promised, her voice thick with emotion. "Because of how brave you were today, we know who he is, and we're going to make sure he can't hurt anyone else." Emma nodded solemnly and turned back to Rex. "You helped me be brave," she whispered to the German Shepherd. "Thank you for listening to my secrets." As the investigation swirled around them, preparing to hunt down Miguel Santos, Emma continued her quiet conversation with Rex, finding strength in his unwavering presence, while the adults worked to deliver the justice her mother deserved. The healing process that had begun with 2 simple words, "good dog," had not only saved Emma's soul, but had also redirected an entire murder investigation toward the truth. The race to find Miguel Santos had begun, and every moment counted. 6 months later, the morning sun streamed through the windows of Denver's family court with the same golden warmth that had witnessed Emma Martinez's miraculous breakthrough. But everything else had changed in ways no one could have imagined. Judge Patricia Williams stood at those same windows, watching a very different scene unfold in her chambers. One filled with laughter, healing, and the kind of justice that restores faith in the system. Emma Martinez, now a vibrant 4-year-old, sat cross-legged on the familiar carpet beside Rex. But instead of the broken, silent child who had occupied this space months ago, she was a picture of resilient health. Her dark hair was braided with colorful ribbons. Her cheeks were rosy with life, and her eyes sparkled with the natural curiosity of a child who had learned to trust the world again. She was teaching Rex new tricks, giggling with delight each time the German Shepherd performed a perfect shake hands or roll over. "Look, Judge Williams," Emma called out with the confidence of a child who had found her voice and never intended to lose it again. "Rex can dance now. Daddy Carlos taught me how to teach him." The mention of her father brought smiles to everyone in the room. Carlos Martinez sat in the chair where Emma had once been frozen in trauma, but his presence radiated the quiet strength of a man who had been cleared of all suspicion and reunited with his daughter. The months of investigation that followed, Emma's breakthrough had completely exonerated him, revealing the depth of his love for both his murdered wife and traumatized daughter. "She's remarkable," Dr. Thompson observed, his professional amazement evident even after months of sessions with Emma and Rex. "The resilience of children never ceases to amaze me, but Emma's recovery has been extraordinary. Her weekly sessions with Rex have not only helped her process the trauma, but it actually made her stronger and more empathetic than many adults." Officer Morrison leaned against the wall, watching his partner work with Emma with the satisfied expression of someone who had witnessed countless miracles, but never tired of seeing them unfold. Rex's tail wagged enthusiastically as Emma praised his performance, the German Shepherd's joy in their friendship evident in every movement. Their bond had evolved from therapeutic necessity to genuine companionship, a friendship that had literally saved Emma's life and soul. Detective Sarah Chun entered the chambers carrying a thick file folder, her expression a mixture of professional satisfaction and personal relief. The months following Emma's testimony had been among the most intensive of her career, but they had also been the most rewarding. "Miguel Santos was sentenced this morning," she announced to the room. "Life in prison without possibility of parole." Emma's testimony, delivered with Rex right beside her in the courtroom, was the key piece of evidence that convicted him. The conviction had been a watershed moment, not just for Emma's case, but for the entire Denver legal system. Emma's ability to testify while Rex lay supportively at her feet had established new precedents for using therapy animals in courtrooms involving child witnesses. Her courage in facing her mother's killer had not only delivered justice for Isabella Martinez, but had also prevented Miguel Santos from potentially harming other women. Judge Williams smiled as she watched Emma demonstrate Rex's newest trick, playing dead and then coming back to life with a dramatic leap and tail wag. The symbolism wasn't lost on anyone in the room. Emma herself had come back to life through her connection with this remarkable dog, and her resurrection had rippled outward to bring healing and justice to an entire community. "Tell them the best news," Carlos Martinez said, his voice thick with emotion as he watched his daughter play with the dog who had saved her. Emma looked up from Rex with eyes shining with excitement. "Rex gets to come live with us," she announced. "Officer Morrison says Rex is ready to retire, and Daddy says we can give him a forever home where he can just be a regular dog and play with me every day." The announcement brought tears to several eyes in the room. Rex's official retirement from the Denver Police Department had been fast-tracked in recognition of his extraordinary service not just to Emma, but to the entire justice system. His work with Emma had led to the establishment of the Rex Martinez Memorial Therapy Dog program, named in honor of both the dog and Isabella Martinez, which would train and deploy therapy animals throughout Colorado's court system. Maria Santos, who had been cleared of any family connection to Miguel Santos, had continued as Emma's foster mother during the investigation and legal proceedings. Now, with Carlos Martinez's life rebuilt and his daughter healed, the transition back to their family home was proceeding smoothly. Emma talks about Rex constantly, Maria laughed. I think she's more excited about him moving in than she was. About going back to live with her daddy. Dr. Thompson had been documenting Emma's recovery for what would become a landmark study in childhood trauma treatment. Emma's case has already changed how we approach therapy for traumatized children. He explained. 12 other states have contacted us about implementing similar therapy animal programs. Her healing journey is literally helping children across the country. Emma stood up and hugged Rex around his neck, a gesture natural and filled with the pure love that only children and dogs seem capable of sharing so freely. Rex saved me, she said simply, with a matter-of-fact wisdom that trauma sometimes grants to children. And now I get to save him by giving him the best home ever. As the afternoon session concluded, Judge Williams reflected on the extraordinary journey that had begun with 2 whispered words, good dog, and had evolved into a story of healing, justice, and hope that would inspire legal professionals and trauma survivors for years to come. Emma Martinez had not only found her voice, but had used it to change an entire system, proving that sometimes the smallest voices carry the most powerful truths. The broken little girl, who had once sat silent and frozen in that very chair, was now a beacon of resilience, skipping out of the courthouse with her father and her beloved Rex, ready to embrace a future filled with the kind of joy that seemed impossible just months ago. Justice had been served, healing had been achieved, and most importantly, hope had been restored, one gentle paw and one brave little voice at a time.